Thanks, Tiki. Long time no see. Tiki and I, at the risk of starting a rumour, Tiki and I go back a long way. I've been in the Parliament for some 23 years and spent a good amount of time in business portfolios, including small business, and have enjoyed interaction with Tiki for a long time and really appreciate her very positive and expert contribution to the public debate. Great to see you all here. Wow, what a gathering and what a venue. A great credit to Rabobank. Well done. It is absolutely amazing. You can imagine I receive many invitations each week, more regularly, more of them lately for some reason. And of course I can't accept all of them all of the time. But I was not going to miss this, not just because it's on Cockatoo Island, which I've not had the cause to visit before, not just because I knew the gathering would be so large, but because, as the promo indicates, today we have the farm leaders and the trailblazers, to quote the promotion, that are leading the fight on greater sustainable profitability in the agriculture sector, a topic very close to my heart. So I wouldn't have missed it for the world. I've been talking to some of those trailblazers over the course of the last hour or so, and it's been fantastic to interact with some of the exhibitors, and I thank Rabobank both for the conference, but for the opportunity to share it with you. The talk here is positive, it is realistic, and of course it's looking forward. I'm sorry I missed Weber's contribution because I heard it was a very progressive and intellectual one, and the sort of thing I would hope to hear from a global CEO from him as it relates to the agriculture sector. The questions, of course, are how can we ensure that technology delivers us a more sustainable future in the agriculture sector? And I think it's a really appropriate and relevant question to be asking. So by contrast, too often I attend conferences where people are effectively talking to themselves, patting themselves on the back, talking ad nauseum about how successful their sector is and congratulating themselves on the achievements. But the reality is not quite like that in Australian agriculture from my perspective. Indeed, productivity in the sector has been flatlining for a decade, if not more. 80% of its output by volume continues to come from just 20% of the firms. According to the ABS, 59% of the business entities in agriculture, I'm not talking about the balance of the value chain, I'm talking about on-farm, have turnovers of less than $200,000 annually. The sector is losing global market share despite our efforts. Its natural resource base is in decline. Droughts are becoming more regular, longer, and of course hotter. Weather events more generally are becoming less predictable. Floods, storms, dust storms, for example. The sector is struggling to secure the workforce it needs to fulfil our aspirations, and of course the workforce we do have is ageing. Our performance on the innovation front is suboptimal. Our heavy exposure to the vagaries of global markets is a worry. Product development and production methods are falling behind consumer expectations and preferences. The sector's costs are high by international standards. Our traditional competitive advantage, our proximity to Asia, is being diminished by lower freight costs, falling freight costs. And of course, as a country of just 25 million people, we have very limited savings, not enough savings to again fulfil our aspirations in the agriculture sector. Now it's a little dated now, but the ANZ's 2012 Greening Pastures report told us that to fulfil those aspirations out to 2050, we will need $600 billion in capital investment. That's billion with a B, billion with a B. And let us not forget, the ABS told us in its December quarter national accounts that the agriculture sector didn't grow, but in fact contracted by 5%. Now, that result, of course, is largely driven by drought, and we hope it's not a trend. But again, the result does underscore our vulnerability and exposure to a more challenging and changing climate. Now, that's the negatives. Despite all of that, I believe the agriculture sector has an amazingly positive future. And this gathering alone brings me great optimism and should bring optimism across the sector. But we won't fix our problems, we won't overcome our challenges until we recognise both the problems and the challenges and become serious as a whole of industry gathering about addressing those challenges. And we won't get there unless we have strong guidance and leadership from government. And we won't get there if we don't have strong partnerships between government and industry. So to meet our aspirations, we do need to be more honest with ourselves. We do need to talk about the challenges more, and we do need to embrace change. We need to drag the whole sector into the 21st century. Many of the people in this room, of course, are already well and truly into the 21st century, but it's not necessarily typical of the whole sector, and we need to lift the whole sector, not just some of it. Now, there were some good developments this week. The government made two announcements. First, after years of climate change denial and a lack of willingness to talk about the decline in our natural resource base, the government made an announcement about a stewardship program which will focus on those things, restoring our soil health, lifting our biodiversity, improving our landscape. And while the announcement wasn't necessarily a thing to cause me to get excited, and not necessarily the way I would have done it, it is an indication of a change of view, direction on the part of the government. And I certainly welcome that. To have the Conservative government talk more about making that shift, I think, is a really important paradigm. We have an election coming soon, and let's have a situation where no matter who wins, we get that shift to that new paradigm. The second was the announcement of the establishment of a Future Food Systems Cooperative Research Centre. We all love our cooperative research centres. They do amazing work. So I just want to say something more about those two things. The announcement of biodiversity building is a modern one, as I said, but it is a big shift and a welcome one. When I became the Shadow Minister about 5.5 years ago, I extended a hand of bipartisanship to the government of the day, the new government. Now, sadly, that offer was declined, and we've spent too much time over the last 5 years arguing largely frivolous points when we should have been talking about the things you've been talking about here today. I should say that offer still stands no matter what happens at the next federal election. But our soil and water resources are the foundation of our industry. Without them, there is no industry. Without a healthier landscape and the greater adoption of water efficiency practices, including, of course, moisture retention, there can be no productivity gain. There can be no sustainable profitability. And we can do these things, or we can't do these things, I should say, without an acceleration in the uptake or the embrace of innovation. That will be our competitive advantage. It is often said that Australian agriculture is good at research, but not very good at innovation. I beg to differ on one point. I don't believe we are good enough on research. I believe we can do much better. Our research work, or our architecture, is fragmented, siloed and inefficient. We have great researchers, but our researchers are being let down by poor architecture. So too do data gaps. If given the opportunity, a Labor government will reform the research system and improve the quality and quantity of data available. If we want to develop good evidence-based policy, we need more and better data from which to make those decisions. And of course, we need better connectivity, something I don't think anyone in this room will challenge. Innovation will be key to our future international competitiveness, as I said. Automation, robotics and mechanisation will replace the expensive unskilled holiday working makers, for example, we rely upon so heavily. But it will also produce meaningful, maybe lifelong jobs, well-paid jobs in the agriculture sector. And I've seen that from time to time as I travel the country. But while we're catching up, the government must find smarter ways of filling those unskilled labour gaps as well. And on so many of these things, we can look to our friends in the Netherlands, and indeed our friends across the ditch, who I think I could safely say are doing so many of these things better than we are. In New Zealand, we know the track record of the Dutch, it's just amazing, but in New Zealand they're doing other things better than us, closer to home, whether it be dairy exports, whether it be forestry research, whether it be rugby, dare I say, but we can look to them to learn some lessons. And if I'm given the opportunity to serve as a minister, I'll be looking to our friends in the Netherlands and in New Zealand for some of that guidance, because they are doing things very, very well. Now, for 5 years, I've been talking about the need to focus more on product value, not just volume. For the same period, the coalition government has shown zero interest in the subject, but hopefully the establishment of the CRC will have changed that dynamic, as I said. We are the driest inhabited continent in the world. Our soil resources will remain limited no matter how well we restore them to good health. It is critical that a share of those resources, a large share, is allocated to the products, to the product markets where we secure maximum possible product value. We've got to chase those niche, high-quality, premium markets as a country. And government does have a role working in partnership with you in chasing those opportunities. Australia cannot afford to be too exposed to commodity markets where we are facing increasing competition and where we are increasingly price takers. That is not alone our future. It cannot afford to be. We won't build the competitiveness we need to build. We won't have the natural resources we need to compete in those markets in every case. We, of course, begin with a very, very sound base. We have some of the best farmers in the world. We have some of the best innovators in the world. And, of course, we have that reputation as a provider of clean, green, safe, high-quality food. So we have a very good base from which to build. A large slice of our research effort must be directed, though, at those product markets. It's just so important, whether it be a Wagyu beef, in which the fat is relatively good for you, whether it be a piece of fruit of a special colour or a special taste, or even just the way we package things. There are plenty of opportunities out there, and our research must be focused on it. Our branding effort must improve too. Think of the New Zealanders again. They are kicking goals on that front. We are not. We have a proliferation of brands in this country, proliferated enough to confuse me and you, let alone overseas customers, and we must address that problem. Now, we've all become familiar with the term frustration. Disruption. We are frustrated from time to time. And when we think of disruption, we think of technology, social media, Airbnb, Uber, for example, and that's obvious. And of course, changes in technology will play to our advantage as a relatively lower cost country. But there are two other significant forms of disruption which will continue to guide how we respond to changing markets. And they are, of course, changing consumer preferences and changing community attitude. More and more our customers, both here and abroad, will expect us to produce our food in a sustainable way, in an ethical way, in a way which is respectful of animal welfare expectations, for example. And of course, their food preferences will change. Every day our consumers face a wave of advice about what foods they should be eating or not eating. No meat, more meat, etc. It goes on, and they are bombarded with information. But the smart players are listening to their consumers. Look at the big retailers. We might not always appreciate the development, but they've got their the big chains have got their vegan burgers. And they're not doing that because they like vegan burgers. They're doing that because their customers are demanding vegan burgers. And that's the only way they're going to make money into the future. So we need to understand our customer and not fight our customer, not take objection to the fact that people are changing their consumer preferences. Now, we've got to listen and say, okay, we hear you, and we're going to change our product markets as well. So we can deliver to you what you're asking for. That's the forward-thinking way of responding to those changing consumer demands. And this is a good thing because as a developed, wealthy nation, we do have the flexibility and the know-how to make those adjustments to that consumer ask. This can be to our advantage. We can't compete against low-cost jurisdictions in commodity markets on every occasion, but we are smart enough and we can secure the capital we need to compete in that new paradigm, and that's what we should be doing. Finally, can I just say that I'm really pleased that the Farm2Fork event is about the whole value chain. Too often I hear disputes between those inside the farm gate, the processors, the manufacturers, or the retailers, or whoever that might be. The fact is that our value chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And we need a whole of government and a whole of industry approach to making sure that link is as good as it can be. Every link along that chain is as strong and as profitable and sustainable as it can be. So this is a good thing, that today as we gather, Rabo has given us the guidance, Rabobank, to ensure that we're talking about not just what happens inside the farm, but what happens outside the farm as well, because the farm community cannot thrive without a healthy manufacturing, distribution, retail sector, etc. So having said that, I think it's time we got on with it. We don't have a moment to lose, and I wish you the best for the balance of the conference and exhibition, and I thank Rabobank for the opportunity to address you this afternoon. Thank you.